control Castle Grayskull. Stop me if you dare.
You know how, when you look back at the cartoons you loved as a kid, you start realizing, wait a second, that show wasn't just for kids at all. Some of our favorite Saturday morning classics weren't the squeaky clean fun we thought they were. Nope. These shows were packed with weirdness, shocking undertones, and stories that were way too grown up for the age group they were supposedly made for. And today, we're breaking down 5 cult cartoons from the 80s and 90s that secretly had adult-level stories and bizarre moments that left a mark on every kid who watched them. Stick with me, because number 5 didn't just push the envelope. It predicted the future in ways that will blow your mind. Number 1. HeMan, the campy show with dark undertones.
By the power of Grayskull!
When you hear the words He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, you probably think of toy commercials disguised as cartoons, bulging muscles, and that iconic battle cry, "I have the power!" And yeah, you wouldn't be wrong. The show was literally created to sell action figures. But here's the thing. For a cartoon designed to move plastic toys off the shelves, He-Man was weird. Like, really weird. On the surface, it looked campy. Skeletor's over-the-top cackling, He-Man's impossibly wholesome smile, and villains with names so ridiculous they sounded like they were dreamed up in 5 minutes. Beastman, Merman, Trapjaw. The whole thing could have easily been dismissed as just silly fun for kids. But if you actually sat down and watched it, there were moments that made even parents raise an eyebrow. It wasn't just cheesy, it was oddly unsettling. Take the infamous Toy Maker episode. What should have been a goofy, lighthearted adventure suddenly turned into pure nightmare fuel. The villain creates an army of living toys, not cuddly teddy bears or harmless wind-up monkeys, but toys with razor-sharp teeth and an unnatural, glassy-eyed stare designed to obey only him. Picture this: cheerful music playing in the background, bright and colorful animation, and then, out of nowhere, a toy soldier leans in and threatens to kill our heroes. For kids, it was creepy. For adults watching in the background, it was downright disturbing. And let's talk about the other kind of weirdness. The stuff that made parents shift uncomfortably on the couch. Those accidentally too sexual moments. He-Man's interactions with Teela, for example, were often dripping with tension that didn't quite belong in a Saturday morning cartoon.
Thank you for your help, but I don't deserve it.
Look, Teela.
Oh, please don't start. I'm sure you've heard what I did, and nothing you can say will make me go back.
Oh?
The dialogue might have been innocent enough, but the body language and drawn-out stares told another story. And Skeletor's crew? Forget it. Nearly every villain surrounding him was dressed in skin-tight, revealing outfits that seemed pulled straight from an adult fantasy comic, not a children's show. Evelyn, in particular, wore costumes that had more in common with a 1970s glam rock stage outfit than anything you'd expect on a kid's cartoon.
We can't get in! He-Man and the Sorceress have stopped us every time we've tried!
Looking back, it's almost shocking that nobody batted an eye. But the strangest part? The tone. One second, you'd have He-Man delivering a corny, after-school special-style life lesson about teamwork or kindness. The next, you'd be watching a villain try to enslave a village with magic mind control devices. Bright colors, happy music, and then, boom! Themes of betrayal, destruction, and fear slipped right in under the radar. For kids, it was just another fun adventure. But for adults, He-Man was a bizarre mashup of campy masculinity, hidden innuendo, and plot lines that sometimes made zero sense. And honestly, that's exactly what made it unforgettable. It was so outlandish, so tonally inconsistent, that it became burned into our memories.
I hope the rest of you will leave the moon in peace.
Forget it, He-Man!
The truth is, He-Man was never just a cartoon about good guys beating bad guys. It was a chaotic blend of toy marketing, unintentional adult themes, and moments of genuine nightmare fuel. And somehow that mix is what turned it into a cultural phenomenon we still talk about today. But if you thought He-Man was strange, just wait until you hear what Disney slipped into Gargoyles. Because this wasn't your typical Saturday morning cartoon. It looked like a show about stone creatures protecting a city. But hidden underneath were plots pulled straight from Shakespeare, themes of racism and betrayal, and one character whose tragic story is so dark, it'll make you wonder how this ever made it onto kids' TV. Number 2. Gargoyles, Shakespeare and social commentary in disguise.
Xanatos.
It's nice to see you too, Goliath.
Gargoyles. This wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon you could watch with a bowl of cereal. This was Shakespeare in disguise, literally. The creators didn't just sprinkle in clever nods, they pulled entire story arcs straight from Macbeth, weaving betrayals, curses, and tragedies into a show that was supposed to be for kids. And at the center of it all was Demona, a character so layered and tragic that to this day, many fans argue she's one of the most complex villains Disney has ever created. Demona wasn't your average bad guy cackling in the shadows. She was broken, bitter, and deeply human, even though she wasn't human at all.
So far, my plans have always been thwarted, one after the other. But tonight, I take control.
Her story was one of loss, piled on top of betrayal, pain that stretched across centuries, and decisions that always seemed to make things worse. She sold out her own people in an attempt to protect them, only to watch most of them destroyed. She lost the trust of Goliath, the one person who still believed in her, and instead of facing the guilt, she doubled down on her hatred. The most haunting part? She never saw herself as the villain. In her mind, humans were always to blame, and that blind refusal to face her own part in the tragedy made her one of the most chillingly real characters in animation history. And the themes went way beyond Demona. Gargoyles tackled issues that most adult dramas didn't dare to touch in the 90s. Racism, prejudice, cycles of violence, cultural survival, the crushing weight of trauma. These weren't background ideas. They were the very heartbeat of the show. Take Goliath's relationship with Elisa Mazza, a human police detective. It wasn't just groundbreaking for hinting at an interracial romance in a kid's cartoon.
You'll all have to find another place to live. But don't worry, I think I found the perfect place.
There's no need for that.
It was a quiet, revolutionary statement about trust, love, and unity in a world determined to keep them apart. Even today, you can feel the boldness of that choice. And that's why Gargoyles hit so differently. It didn't talk down to kids. It expected us to rise to the occasion, to understand themes that many adults weren't even ready to discuss. Looking back now, it's clear. This wasn't just one of the most socially conscious cartoons of the decade. It was a gothic epic masquerading as children's television. And here's where the curiosity kicks in. If Gargoyles was secretly a Shakespearean tragedy about racism and survival, then our next show might have gone even further. Because while Gargoyles gave us closure and meaning in its darkness, the next cartoon left us with a mystery so disturbing that fans are still debating it decades later. That's right, the question nobody has ever been able to answer. Did the kids from Dungeons & Dragons ever make it home? Or were they dead from the very first episode?
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Number 3. Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon without an ending. Now let's dive into one of the most mysterious and downright unsettling cartoons of the 1980s, Dungeons and Dragons. At first glance, it seemed simple enough. 6 kids hop on a carnival ride, only to be sucked into a strange, magical realm where they're each given powerful weapons by the enigmatic Dungeon Master. The mission? Defeat the evil sorcerer Venger, survive countless dangers, and hopefully find their way home. Sounds like a fun Saturday morning adventure, right? But here's the thing. For millions of kids, Dungeons and Dragons became one of the most haunting shows of their childhood. And not just because of the monsters or the stakes, but because the story never ended. The show ran for 3 seasons, 27 episodes in total, and then, without warning, it was canceled. The final episode that was supposed to give fans closure never aired. For decades, kids were left hanging, wondering, did they ever make it home? Or were they trapped in that cursed realm forever? And that's when the theories started. Some fans believe the kids actually died in the very first episode, on that roller coaster, and the magical world they landed in was some form of purgatory. The weapons they were given weren't tools for battle, they were symbolic, tied to the traits they would need to redeem themselves. Think about it. Courage, sacrifice, wisdom, compassion. Others point the finger at Dungeon Master himself. He always seemed to know too much. He gave cryptic advice that often made things worse. Some fans argue he wasn't guiding them to safety at all. He was keeping them there, manipulating their every move like pawns on a chessboard. In this theory, Dungeon Master isn't a mentor. He's the true villain. And then there's Venger. In the show, he's painted as pure evil. But some fans speculate that he was actually a fallen hero, cursed and twisted, trying to warn the kids while Dungeon Master kept them in the dark. Venger was also known as his long-lost son.
You're Venger's father?
There's not a very big family resemblance.
Thousands of years ago, I chose to serve another master, one of evil.
Suddenly, the entire story feels less like good versus evil and more like a horror tale of betrayal and manipulation. Even without the theories, the show itself got shockingly dark for its time. One episode forced the kids to consider sacrificing themselves to save an entire village. Another featured Venger tempting them to abandon their friends for power. And then there's the constant undercurrent of hopelessness. Every time they thought they were close to escaping, something snatched that hope away. For kids in the 80s, this was heavy stuff. They weren't watching a simple fantasy adventure. They were watching a story that felt more like the Twilight Zone for children. And here's the kicker. Years later, the script for the Lost finale surfaced. It revealed that the kids finally had the choice to go home, but some of them weren't even sure they wanted to anymore. After everything they'd been through, could they really return to the lives they once had? The fact that the show never gave us that closure cemented Dungeons and Dragons as one of the most unforgettable and unsettling cult cartoons of its time. But here's the question I'll leave you with. Do you think the kids ever made it home? Or was the entire show a darker story about death, purgatory, and the cost of hope? And if you think that was disturbing, just wait. Because the next cartoon on our list looked bright and cheerful, but its storylines tackled drugs, disease, and environmental destruction in ways that scarred kids for life. Number 4, Captain Planet, kids show with genuinely disturbing plots.
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet.
Now, if you thought Dungeons & Dragons was unsettling because of its mystery, the next cartoon went to an even stranger place. On the surface, it looked bright and cheerful. A bunch of diverse teens saving the planet with magical rings, and a superhero made of recycled good intentions. But don't be fooled. Captain Planet and the Planeteers was one of the most unexpectedly disturbing cartoons of the 90s. Sure, the intro was catchy, and the Planeteers seemed like the ultimate Saturday morning role models. But behind all the corny puns and eco-friendly slogans were episodes that went shockingly dark in ways most kids didn't fully understand until years later. Let's start with the infamous episode, A Formula for Hate. This wasn't just about littering or pollution. This was about HIV and AIDS on a children's cartoon. The plot followed a young boy who contracted the virus through a blood transfusion. Instead of monsters or evil villains, the real danger was prejudice. His classmates bullied him, parents tried to keep him out of school, and rumors spread like wildfire. The episode didn't sugarcoat it either. It showed how fear and ignorance could destroy lives just as much as the illness itself. For many kids, this was their first introduction to the AIDS epidemic, and it was devastating. And that wasn't the only time Captain Planet got real.
Give him the facts, Coach.
You can't get AIDS from casual contact. Hugging, touching, they're okay.
Remember the episodes about drugs? In Mind Pollution, kids were tricked into taking a designer drug called Bliss. Within minutes, you watched innocent teens transform into addicts. Eyes glazed over, personalities warped, their lives spiraling out of control. It was terrifying to see as a kid, and the imagery was more suited for an anti-drug PSA than a cartoon block sandwiched between Tiny Toon Adventures reruns. Then there were the environmental disaster episodes. Entire forests reduced to ash, oceans poisoned to the point of no return. One storyline even had aliens arrive on Earth, not to conquer humanity, but to literally strip mine the planet until it was left a barren wasteland. The message was crystal clear: destroy the Earth, and there's no turning back. The strangest part, though, was the tone whiplash. One moment, Wheeler's cracking jokes, and Ma-Ti is talking to a monkey, and the next, you're staring at kids overdosing in alleys, or entire communities wiped out by pollution and disease. It was emotional whiplash on a Saturday morning. And the villains? They weren't silly. They were horrifying caricatures of real-world threats. Loot and plunder, Hoggish Greedley, Dr. Blight. They weren't just evil for fun. They were capitalistic monsters profiting from destruction. For a kid, it was scary. For adults rewatching it now, it feels uncomfortably relevant. Looking back, it's clear that Captain Planet wasn't just teaching kids to recycle. It was trying to wake us up to the real dangers in the world. Drugs, disease, climate change, greed. And it didn't pull its punches. Some of us walked away inspired. Others walked away scarred. And if you think a cartoon about recycling going that dark sounds shocking, just wait until you hear about the next one. Because while Captain Planet tried to scare us straight about the real world, the next show on our list transported us inside a world we didn't even understand yet, and predicted the future in ways that are still hauntingly accurate today. Number 5. ReBoot. The cartoon that predicted the internet. And now we come to what might be the strangest and most prophetic cartoon of them all.
No one knows for sure, but I intend to find out. ReBoot!
ReBoot. At first glance, it didn't look like much. It was colorful, computer animated, and filled with quirky characters who lived inside a digital city known as Mainframe. For most kids, it felt like a fun, futuristic adventure. But the deeper you got into ReBoot, the more you realized this wasn't just a cartoon. It was a warning. See, ReBoot came out in 1994, years before most kids even had home internet. The world had no idea what cyberspace would eventually become. And yet, somehow, this show nailed it. Viruses weren't just lines of malicious code. They were living, breathing villains like Megabyte and Hexadecimal, figures who represented chaos, corruption, and control. And every time they infected part of Mainframe, it was like watching a digital plague spread. But it didn't stop there. The show got darker, much darker as it went on. Early on, you had lighthearted stories about Bob the Guardian and his young sidekick Esno protecting the system from danger. But by season 3, things took a shocking turn. Bob was gone, and Enzo, once an innocent, wide-eyed kid, was thrown into brutal survival situations inside the games. And when he couldn't win, he aged up in the blink of an eye, transforming into a hardened, battle-scarred warrior who called himself Matrix. That shift was pretty unsettling for every kid watching.
Viruses are predatory by design, and it is time for me to follow my function. Prepare yourselves for the hunt.
It was like watching a childhood friend ripped from the innocence of youth and forced into a world of violence, despair, and moral compromise. And let's be honest, most of us weren't ready for that. And then there was Hexadecimal, one of the most unnerving villains in cartoon history. Her ever-shifting masks, her unpredictable mood swings, and her eerie, theatrical demeanor made her both mesmerizing and terrifying. She wasn't a mustache-twirling villain, she was chaos personified. And in many ways, she represented how uncontrollable and unpredictable the digital world would become.
My dear Fong, now you really are the keeper of the core.
Looking back, ReBoot feels like a prophecy. Think about it, a show from the mid-90s warning us about viruses that could take over entire systems, games that trapped you in addictive loops, and digital identities that could change who you were forever. Sound familiar? Today, we call that the internet. The brilliance of ReBoot was that it used flashy visuals and action-packed stories to lure kids in, while quietly planting seeds about the dangers of a world we hadn't even entered yet. And now, watching it decades later, you can't help but wonder how much of this was supposed to be entertainment and how much of it was a warning we didn't listen to. Because as it turns out, the weirdest part of ReBoot wasn't the talking binomes or the bizarre game worlds. It's that a children's cartoon from 1994 understood the dangers of the digital age long before the rest of us did.
We lost many dear friends before Bob came to Mainframe and helped us defeat the user.
So here's the real question. Was ReBoot just ahead of its time? Or did it actually predict the future we're living in right now? So there you have it. 5 cult cartoons that were way weirder and way more adult than we realized as kids. From HeMan's bizarre camp, to Gargoyles' Shakespearean tragedy, to the unsettling mystery of Dungeons & Dragons, the dark warnings of Captain Planet, and the digital prophecy of ReBoot. These weren't just cartoons. They were lessons, warnings, and sometimes nightmares dressed up as Saturday morning fun. But now I want to hear from you. Which of these shows messed with your childhood the most? And did you ever notice just how adult these stories really were? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want me to cover even more hidden stories behind your favorite 80s and 90s cartoons, hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the DVDs linked in the description so you can relive these shows with very different eyes. We'll see you next time.